Okay, I don't understand. This looks correct. It's in Albatross. Yep, it's in Albatross. The ship is owned by Albatross. Yep. I don't know. Oh my God. All right. So here's a pro tip. You know, RDMS only works if you actually put it on the ship. Who knew, right? One of the most important things you can learn as a player in Dual Universe is how to set up secure access to your ships and bases. If you want to learn how to let other players board your ship, access doors or containers, or even fly them, then RDMS is how you do that. So let's jump into it. The first thing I want to address here is, why is this important, right? Inevitably, at some point in the game, you're going to want for someone else to be able to access something that you own. Whether that is letting them use parts of your base, or if that's letting them even just do something simple like sit in a ship that you own, but you don't want to accidentally give them the ability to steal that ship. Unfortunately, the game does provide a set of tools that lets you do this in a very easy way, but the easy way is not a very good way. What I'm talking about is if you right click on a ship that you own and you go to construct share, there's a couple options here. You can say with friends, or you can say with an organization that you belong to. If you do one of these two options, it's going to automatically create all of the access management on the backside for you, but it's going to do it with a very broad scope of rights, which means that people will have access to the containers, to fly the ship, to move it, to tear it apart, remove things off of it, or steal from the ship. And that may not be what you want to do. It's kind of a dangerous path. Especially if you're a new player to the game, you probably don't want to use those options for anybody that you're allowing into your org or just access to your base in general. So let's talk about the better way to do this with RDMS management. You can access this either by hitting your tab key and going over here to, it's somewhere, there it is, RDMS, or you'll see that the hotkey is listed here as F7. Inside F7, the first page you get to, your dashboard, shows you, most importantly, what you belong to. And this is both things that you own personally, so construct cores that are directly under your ownership, or cores that you have access to in organizations you belong in. It's worth noting that this is not a list of every organization you belong to. This is just the organizations that you have access to the cores of. Which brings us to the very first thing that you want to do. You want to check the thing that you're about to give access to, what you're trying to create rights for. You need to check who actually owns it. In this case, for this demonstration, I'm going to be using the Ox here by Albatross. And if I just hover over any part of the ship, some voxels of the ship somewhere, and you wait a second, it's going to pop up with a tooltip that tells you who owns it. In this case, I can see it's owned by Albatross Inc., which means that when I'm setting up my RDMS rights for this ship, I need to make sure that I'm doing this under the Albatross tab. If you are setting up rights for a ship that you directly own, so it says owner code infused, for example, then you'd want to make sure that you're selecting your personal tab of RDMS. So when you first see this list of everything that's on this page, it's probably going to look a little bit daunting. But don't worry, we're going to walk through it piece by piece. It's not even going to take that long, and it's not nearly as complex as it looks. Ultimately, what this whole thing boils down to is setting up what's called policies. A policy is something that ties two things together, three things technically. We're going to be talking about up front are the actors and the tags. The actors are who can access your ship. The rights is what you will let all of those people do. And the tag is the most important part. This is how you actually assign this policy to your ship. Something that's important to note is that any construct you create will automatically have a tag assigned that has the name of the construct as the tag. This is what allows the game system to do the automatic share part of the menu that lets you share something with friends or an organization. It's handled by assigning it automatically to one construct tag that you click on. So for example, this is a list of all the different ship names that we own inside the organization, and there's a lot of them. But ideally, we don't want to use those. We want to use something that is repeatable, because that's really the biggest benefit of this policies RDMS, is that you can create something that you can use on multiple constructs to do the same thing over and over, so you don't have to individually set up rights every single time. So let's go down here to the bottom and hit create tag. There's going to be two options here, simple and composite. Composite we're going to come back to, because this is kind of a cool thing you can use. For now, we're going to use simple, which is just a tag name and a description. And for this first demonstration, what I'm going to show is how you can let people board your ship and sit in a chair. One of the most common things that people typically need to get set up right off the bat. So I'm going to go ahead and call this Albatross boarding, since this is specific to the Albatross organization, and the intent is to allow people to board the ship. And for a description, I'll say rights. This is doesn't have to look up the actual details of the policy. You can just see the description and know what it does. Rights to boarding and chairs. And then we'll hit create. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to set up the list of who I want to have access to the policy that I'm about to make. So this is just the order I tend to like to go in. I like to think about what the tag is first, because it helps me define what the intent of the policy I'm making is. Then I like to go into actors and set up something here. So I'm going to create a new actor, and I'm going to call this the same thing. I'm just going to call this Albatross boarding. Partially just to make it clear that you can use the same name for both the policy, the actors, and the tags, and all of that's fine. That doesn't really matter. It's more important to make sure that you name things in a way that makes sense to you, so that you understand what your tags are when you are assigning them to a ship. So now we can come down here and we can set up who will have access to this. If you have other lists, you can already create them by picking them here. So you can essentially create one parent actor list that combines other lists that you've already created. Or you can individually add people. So for example, if I wanted to add Dr. Rhubarb as an individual user, then I would search for his name. You don't even have to complete it, it'll pop up. And I can add him to this list. Or I can remove him from the list if I want to. Next, let's add an organization. So for example, I'm going to let everyone in Infinity have access to this tag. So I'm going to search for Infinity, and this is a pretty big list, so let me reduce it down a little bit. And you just want to make sure that you're looking at the header that's here. So this says organizations. You notice that when I back this up a little bit, if there are players who also match that name, it'll show in a tag there as well. So make sure if you're trying to assign to an organization, make sure that you are looking at the correct section of this. So I want Infinity Corporation. There we go. And then I'll do Albatross as well for fun. Just to showcase again that there's somebody out there who named themselves Albatross. And I want the organization, not whoever this is. So let's create our actor. And now finally, we're going to create the actual policy. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom, hit create policy. And I'm just going to call this the exact same thing, Albatross boarding. I'm going to choose from the actors, the ones that I already made, Albatross boarding. The tag that I want to use is, I'm going to search for it here because there are a lot of them. The Albatross boarding tag. There we go. And now finally, and this is why I saved the rights for last, now we assign what we actually want them to be able to do. This is a large list, and there are several things in here that you can give access to that you may not want to if you use the default menu that says share construct with. Doing that gives access to a lot of things, and I do recommend go through this list. Most of it makes a lot of sense. I think most of these are pretty self-explanatory, like for example, the ability to view the contents of a container. The one that I want to call out, because this is something that the default does give access to, is use element. Use element sounds innocent enough on its own, but this one single right is actually the thing that lets people not only use doors, but it lets them fly the ship because it lets them use the pilot seat. It's for chairs, it's for programming boards, anything that is an element that you press the F key to activate or toggle. Use element is what allows access to that. So this one single right is probably one of the most important and dangerous things to understand. And we are going to dive into this a little bit more. But for now, the only thing I'm going to grant on this is the ability to board, which is up here, board construct. And then we'll hit save. Next, let's take a look at how you actually apply this to a ship. So for example, we were looking at our aux before. If you right click, oftentimes, and this depends on where you right click. If I right click on a element, for example, this vertical booster, you'll have a couple different menus. You'll have the advanced menu, construct menu. The advanced menu applies specifically to the element. So this is where you can set element rights, which we're going to come back to a little bit later on. This is for skins, engine tags, applying talents, things like that. Construct applies to the entire ship. So we want to go to construct, down here to advanced, and then set construct rights. This will give us access to a list that we can then pick our tag from. And this list will be determined by who owns the construct that you're trying to assign. So since we created Albatross, I forgot the boarding part again. Albatross boarding inside the Albatross organization, and this is an Albatross owned ship. That is what allows me to have access to that list. If I go to a different ship owned by somebody else, such as this one, which is owned directly by me, and I try to do the same thing, construct, advanced, set construct rights, then it's not going to be in this list. I try to search for Albatross boarding and nothing shows up. So if you ever experience problems with getting your RDMS to work, first thing I would check is who owns the construct and did you create it in the correct tab. So now anybody in that actor list would have the ability to come on board the ship. Typically what would happen if somebody doesn't have access to get inside your ship is they will see a repulsor field that looks something similar to how these shields look, but it'll be a orange or red field that pushes you away. One of the things that's dangerous though is that only happens if the ship is being flown. So if someone is in the piloting seat. If somebody is not actively piloting the ship, then anybody can come on board. So anyone can just come up on your ship and walk around, do what they want to. But the moment that someone starts to fly it, if they do not have the boarding rights, then they will just fall right through the bottom, fall out of it, and you'll take off on your merry way. One of the reasons this is important is because I've seen some bad advice out there where someone might say, oh, if you want to give them access to your ship, you want to use the use element rights. So if you use element, but you do not have board construct, then what this will let you do is it'll let you sit in a chair, because use element considers the chairs, and by extension also it would let them fly the ship, which is not good, but it would let them use the F key to sit down and activate one of these seats. But as soon as you start flying the ship, because they don't have the access to be on board, they will just fall right out. So it's important that if you want them to have access to both the chairs and to be able to actually stay on the ship, they need to have access to both sets of rights. Which this brings us to our next problem, because like I've said before, I don't want to use the use element RDMS right, because then that lets them have access to things like containers and fuel tanks and the pilot seat. They can fly the ship, lets them use programming boards and other things. That is a dangerous thing to let people have access to. So for now, let me go ahead and put this back, and I'm going to change this to the boarding. And we're going to set up another policy. This time we're going to call this one a different tag name. We're going to call it Albatross. We'll call this Albatross use element. We'll just be really clear about it. And I'm going to go into my policies and make a new one. I'm going to use the same actor set as before with the Albatross boarding set, but this time I'm going to be using the Albatross use element set. And I'm going to give this time, of course, the use element right. And I'm going to save this. Oops, I forgot to give it a name. albatross use element. So the difference this time is on the ship, if I come back here just to validate that again, set construct rights, I have albatross boarding on the ship. You can, however, set individual rights on a per element basis. So if I right click on the element like I showed earlier in the video and say advanced set element rights, I can assign a policy just to this one chair. So now I can come back in here and I can go down to my albatross use element that I set up. And I'm just going to search for this to make it easier. Albatross use element. I can save this onto here. And now anybody that has access to board the ship will also have access to sit just in this one specific chair. The downside to this, of course, is that I now have to go through for every single one of these that I want to do this on and do this on a per chair basis. Come in here, right click, set advanced, use advanced RDMS, click on use elements, close it, and just do this for every single chair aboard the whole thing. And that will take probably quite a while. However, I do want to note this is the most secure way about creating rights for your ship when we're dealing with the use element right. This is especially helpful if you want to control access to things like doors, or if you have dispensers that you want people to be able to use to purchase items from you. Things of that nature. Single target element right control is great. However, let's imagine a scenario in which you have, let's say, a base and you have hundreds, potentially, let's say thousands of chairs, and you just really don't want to have to go to every single chair and right click, assign RDMS, and choose use element on each one of those. There is a different way you can do this. And this brings us back to, in the create tag menu, the thing that we skipped before, composite. Composite tag does exactly that. Composite tag lets you choose an element from the known list of elements in the game broken down by category and create a tag that will only apply to that specific element. Now we do need a parent tag for this to work. To make things easy, I recommend setting up a new simple tag to act as our parent. So I'm going to call this one albatross chairs and create that. And then we'll come back into create tag, go to composite, and we'll select our albatross chairs that we just made. Oh, I forgot we can't search this. So looking for albatross chairs. And then the search precision tag is what lets you search the item hierarchy. So all the elements in the game for which thing you would like to target. So if I search for the word chair, it'll show up in a list here. And it's important to note that there's two categories here. There are other tags you've already created, because similar to the actor system, this does let you kind of create combinations of parent tags to merge them together. But we are specifically looking for, in the item hierarchy, the chairs element. You can do this to target all types of different things in the game, such as, like we mentioned before, with dispensers. You'll see dispensers show up. You can also use this to let people access your surrogate stations. So you'll see that the surrogate station equipment is a whole different section of item hierarchy. This counts for both your VR pod, which is the element people use to access your constructs, as well as the VR station, which is the thing people use to travel to other people's pods. So again, in this case, though, we're concerned about the chairs. So I'm going to hit that, go to create. We'll come back over to policies, and we're going to make a new policy now. I'm going to call this one albatross chairs, just like the tag. We'll come over to our tag list, and I'm going to search for chair. Let's see what pulls it. There we go. And I'm going to be selecting the chairs at albatross chairs. The tag list, in this way, the game is going to show you the name of the element and then the name of the parent that it's being applied to. I'm going to use the same actor I did before. And of course, the use element right is what we need here. So I'll hit save. And then the way that we apply that policy, just like anything else that's construct wide, we're going to go to construct, advanced, set construct rights. And now if I come into here and search for chairs, I've got my albatross chairs tag. Save and close. So now with these two tags set up, anybody in that actor list that I created has the rights to both board the ship, and they have rights to specifically use just the chairs on the ship. And then if I wanted somebody to have specific access, like for example to a keyboard, then I would come to this and say advanced for the element rights, set element rights, and give them access to specifically the use element RDMS that we had set up. And again, to just kind of reiterate, I believe that it's probably better to usually to apply RDMS rights to a specific element one at a time. But if you do have a construct with a whole lot of chairs or a whole lot of some other element that you want to use, then the composite rules are great for that. And there are other creative things that you can do with those as well. And as kind of a reminder of one of the benefits of this approach to RDMS is that because we set up an actor list, we can now just go back and modify that. We can add people, add organizations, remove them, whatever we want to do with that. And any policy that we have created that's using that actor list is just automatically updated. So whether I've been doing this on individual chairs or individual elements, or if I've done it to multiple constructs and bases, by having that actor list, I only have to change one thing and instantly update potentially massive numbers of things that would otherwise be a complete pain to do. So that does it for this video. If you need more help with how to use RDMS, or if you have a specific idea or question, something that's kind of bugging you about how to use the system, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll try to get to as many of those as I can. You can also catch me on Twitch over at Code Infuse. I stream Dual Universe pretty much exclusively, and I'm answering questions there all the time. And hey, if you made it to the end of the video, then clearly you must have liked the content, so why not go ahead and like the video? And if you want to see more of me explaining stuff, subscribe as well. And I'll catch you next time.